Welcome to our channel. I hope you're doing well. If you're here, it means you're looking to learn history in the most engaging and impactful way possible. And guess what? History isn't boring. It's simply told wrong most of the time. But today, that changes. Today, we're diving into one of the most pivotal moments in human history: World War II. It wasn't just a war between countries. It was a global conflict that reshaped the entire world and redefined the course of the 20th century. World War II was the deadliest, most widespread conflict in human history. It involved almost every part of the world, and its impact is still felt today. Families were torn apart, cities were destroyed, and millions of innocent lives were lost. The war did not only change the map of the world, it also changed the social, political, and economic fabric of many nations. But we're not just talking about a sequence of events today. We're going to make this history come alive. In our previous video, we talked about World War I, the war that set the stage for everything that followed. If you haven't seen that video yet, I highly recommend you check it out. I go over all the details, and it's perfect for practicing English listening and speaking. But now, it's time to move forward to something even bigger: World War II. In this video, we're going to break down how it started, why it started, and how it fundamentally changed the world forever. We'll explore the causes, the heroes and villains, the battles, and the strategies that were used. World War II wasn't just a conflict between armies. It was a war for survival, for power, and for the future of the planet. The decisions made during this time still shape the world we live in today. So sit back, relax, and get ready for a journey through one of the most impactful periods in human history. By the end of this video, you will not only understand the key events that led to World War II, but also how the modern world as we know it was shaped by this monumental conflict. The story of World War II does not begin in 1939 with the invasion of Poland. No, the roots of this devastating conflict stretch back much earlier, to the aftermath of World War I. The war that promised to be the war to end all wars left the world shattered, its nations broken, and its people scarred. When the war ended in 1918, the world had to deal with its consequences. Empires collapsed, whole generations of young men were lost, economies were in ruins, and perhaps worst of all, entire nations were left bitter and angry about the way the peace was imposed. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, was supposed to bring peace. But in reality, it planted the seeds of a far greater conflict. The treaty's harsh terms placed the blame for the war squarely on Germany's shoulders. Not only were they forced to accept full responsibility for starting the war, but they were also required to pay massive reparations, around $33 billion at the time, roughly $500 billion in today's terms. Germany was humiliated. They lost land, resources, and colonies. Their military was drastically reduced to just 100,000 soldiers, and they were forbidden from having tanks, submarines, and an air force. To add insult to injury, they were forced to sign the War Guilt Clause, acknowledging they were solely responsible for the entire war. This didn't bring peace, it did the opposite. The Treaty of Versailles turned millions of Germans into angry, desperate citizens. Their country was broken. They had lost everything, and the world was blaming them. This humiliated generation would soon demand retribution. Germany was facing economic devastation. With the economic burden placed on them by the Treaty of Versailles, their financial system began to collapse. By 1921, they had already started printing more money to pay the reparations. However, this quickly led to hyperinflation. one of the worst economic crises in history. In 1923, inflation in Germany was so severe that people were carrying wheelbarrows full of money just to buy a loaf of bread. Imagine that. The value of the German mark plummeted. In fact, by the end of 1923, $1 was worth over 4.2 trillion German marks. People began using money as fuel because it was cheaper than firewood. Germany's economy was completely wrecked, leading to a depression. By 1932, the unemployment rate reached 30%. Factories closed, businesses went bankrupt, and millions of people were out of work. The government was weak and unable to manage the crisis. This instability was the perfect breeding ground for extremism. In times of crisis, people look for someone to blame. They want a solution, even if that solution is radical or dangerous. The German people were desperate. They wanted someone to restore Germany's former glory, someone who could promise to make Germany great again. And in their darkest hour, that person appeared: Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler's rise to power in Germany was not inevitable, but it was the result of the perfect storm of economic chaos, political instability, and social unrest. Hitler wasn't just a politician, he was a master manipulator. He understood that people would follow him if he gave them a clear enemy to blame and promised them a better future. Born in Austria in 1889, Hitler had served as a soldier during World War I. He felt deeply betrayed by Germany's leaders and was disgusted by the Treaty of Versailles. He believed that Germany had been stabbed in the back by its own politicians and that the country was being punished unfairly. He also believed in the superiority of the Aryan race and argued that Germany was destined to rule Europe. In the early 1920s, Hitler joined the Nazi Party and quickly rose through its ranks. He understood the power of propaganda and used it to rally the German people. His speeches were powerful, stirring, and full of hate. He blamed Jews, communists, and other minorities for Germany's problems, and he promised to restore Germany's power and greatness. At first, Hitler was not taken seriously by the political establishment. However, as the economic crisis worsened, more and more people turned to Hitler for answers. In 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany, and this marked the beginning of his rise to totalitarian rule. Once Hitler was in power, he wasted no time consolidating his control over Germany. He knew that to become a true dictator, he had to eliminate anyone who might challenge his authority. The first step was to weaken the democratic institutions of the Weimar Republic. In February 1933, the Reichstag building, which housed the German parliament, was set on fire. The Nazis quickly blamed the communists, claiming that the fire was a sign of a communist plot to overthrow the government. Using this as a pretext, Hitler persuaded President Hindenburg to sign the Reichstag fire decree, which suspended civil rights and gave the Nazis sweeping powers to arrest political opponents. The next step came in March 1933, when Hitler pushed through the Enabling Act, which gave him the authority to make laws without the approval of the Reichstag. This was essentially the end of democracy in Germany. Hitler had complete control over the government. But even then, Hitler was not satisfied. He feared that his rivals within the Nazi Party, particularly the leader of the SA, stormtroopers, Ernst Röhm, might challenge his leadership. In June 1934, Hitler ordered the Night of the Long Knives, a purge in which hundreds of people, including Röhm and other potential threats, were arrested and executed. With his rivals eliminated, Hitler had no serious opposition left. Hitler's goal wasn't just to rule Germany. He wanted to create a new world order. His vision was a greater Germany that would dominate Europe, and he intended to achieve this through military conquest. In 1935, Hitler openly defied the Treaty of Versailles by reintroducing conscription and beginning the rebuilding of Germany's military. By 1936, he sent troops into the Rhineland, a demilitarized zone under the treaty, and again, the world did nothing. This emboldened Hitler even more. In 1938, Hitler annexed Austria in what became known as the Anschluss. The world again did nothing. The Nazis were gaining power and confidence, and the world's leaders, particularly British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain and French President Édouard Daladier, adopted a policy of appeasement, hoping that if they gave Hitler what he wanted, he would stop expanding. But they were wrong. In September 1938, Hitler demanded the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia with a large ethnic German population. The leaders of Britain, France, Italy, and Germany met in Munich to negotiate a settlement. In the Munich Agreement, Britain and France allowed Hitler to annex the Sudetenland in exchange for a promise of no further territorial expansion. However, less than 6 months later, in March 1939, Hitler broke his promise and invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia. The world now realized that appeasement had failed. Hitler had no intention of stopping his expansion. By 1939, the world was on the brink of war. Hitler had made one last push for territorial expansion. On September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. The invasion was swift and brutal, with tanks and bombers attacking from all sides. In response, Britain and France declared war on Germany on September 3rd, 1939. World War II had begun. World War II was like no conflict the world had ever seen. It involved over 100 million people from more than 30 countries. Entire cities were destroyed, millions of lives were lost, and the world order was changed forever. But the war wasn't just about battles on the front lines. It was a war of ideologies. Hitler's vision of an Aryan-dominated world clashed with the democratic ideals of the Allies, and the consequences would be felt for decades. This is just the beginning of the story. In the next video, we'll dive into how Hitler expanded his empire, how the Allies responded, and the battles that turned the tide of war. The destruction, the strategies, and the ultimate victory. All of this and more will come in part 2. Stay tuned, because history is about to get even more shocking. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. We hope you've learned many interesting and insightful things about World War II. If you found this story helpful and want to explore more fascinating historical content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss any of our videos. We will continue to take you on historical journeys full of surprises and excitement, helping you gain a deeper understanding of the events that shaped the modern world. If you have any questions or thoughts, don't hesitate to leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. And finally, be sure to turn on notifications to stay updated whenever a new video is released. History isn't just old stories. It's an essential part of our lives. Let's explore and learn from the past to build a better future.